Anotherway, Erasmus Plus Program, Cooperation for Innovation and the Exchange of Good Practices. KA2 Strategic Partnership for Youth, funded by EU. Number 2019-2-IT-03-KA205-016466. Co-funded by the Erasmus Plus Program of the European Union. Mediterranea. Associazione per lo sviluppo locale. This work is licensed under the Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial Share Alike 4.0 International License. To view a copy of this license, visit http://creativecommons.org or send a letter to Creative Commons, P.O. Box 1866, Mountain View, CA 94042, USA. Per altra via. Anotherway. An original method by Francesco Piccolo. Module 1. Who. Lessons 1 and 2. Perception. The first of the 4 modules that make up our training course on Anotherway, AW, is entitled Who. The reason for this title is simple. All our work, formative and productive, will be carried out by people, as plural of person, for people. People, in English, is generally plural of person, but in the judicial sphere is used persons. In order to realize an AW path, it is necessary to know what characteristics these people have in common, what differences, in order to be able to realize a product that adapts to the needs of each person or of the majority of people. Etymologically, person comes from the Latin verb personare, for sound, and indicated the mask used by the actors during the tragedy. This was built in such a way that the voice of the actors resonated, was amplified. Over time, the term has passed from the theater scene to daily life to indicate a human individual who is present on the scene of life. What does one person have in common with another? What does every human individual look like? What are we like about other mammals? For example, we are thirsty, hungry, sleepy. We need heat if we are cold, and shade if there is too much sun, or have sex if our hormones ask for it. So we all look alike in our needs, and these needs range from the simplest, like eating and drinking, to the most complex, like safety or love. Another factor that unites us all is trying to satisfy these needs. We are looking for an indoor place if it rains, and a partner if we want company. Each of our actions has its origin and its return in a specific organ of the body, without which we would remain a set of bones and tissues. The brain. The brain, our grey matter, can be compared to a very powerful and compact computer, able to process countless incoming information, and equally able to send outgoing outputs of enormous complexity. Covering oneself, if it is cold, for example, means not only feeling the sensation, but also looking for the quickest solution to the problem, and performing the necessary operations to solve it, such as remembering where the blanket is, putting it on bed, etc. It must have happened to everyone, to tell a lie. Our smartphones, as well as the most sophisticated of NASA's computers, can't lie. If we enter the information, it will give us the correct answer, unless the starting parameters have not been falsified to induce the PC to give the wrong answer. Only humans can receive the correct information, know perfectly which is the right answer, and yet evade it by giving a wrong one. Let's try to think how many circuits are needed for such a complex operation. That includes the activation of a circuit, the right response to the information received, the inhibition of the same circuits, and, at the same time, the processing of an incorrect output, but convenient for the subject. Obviously, knowing these circuits is not the subject of this lesson, don't be afraid. But it is necessary to be aware of the enormous potentialities enclosed in our skull box. The human brain is so complex to delegate to other organs of the central nervous system other functions such as breathing, swallowing, body temperature control, balance, avoiding nociception. So what does it do, you may be wondering? Everything else. And that's a lot. Let's focus at the moment on the incoming information, on the inputs that the brain receives from the external environment through the sense organs. This process of collecting and encoding inputs is called perception. However, it is now appropriate to distinguish the brain, that is, the organ, from that complex system of faculties and functions that we called mind or psyche. If the former can in fact be described and represented through reports of anatomy, drawings, images taken from CAT, computed axial tomography, or MNR, nuclear magnetic resonance, the latter can only be hypothesized in its structure, deduced in its functioning only from what can be inferred from the responses and behaviors that the individual implements. In other words, you know exactly how my brain is made by looking at a photo of it taken through CAT. But which of you can tell me what I think, or feel, remember, or speak? Perception, memory, language, emotions are functions of the mind and yet have a specific place in the brain. But knowing that there is a visual area in the brain is not the same as knowing why an object looks great to me and to you little ones, nor because it means one thing to me and another to you. In perception, the sense organs record an input and transmit it to the area of the brain responsible for receiving that type of information. What happens to this information and why it has been received, and why others do not remain a discourse related not to anatomy but to psychology, that has among its objects precisely the study of the mind. Before making this distinction, I mentioned the presence of the sense organs, that is, the parts of the body associated with what we commonly call senses. There are 5 senses: sight, smell, taste, touch, hearing. Each of them has one or more organs. As for the sight, it is rather simple. The organ is the eyes. in relation to the sense of smell is the nose. The taste is among those with more organs. The information comes mainly from the tongue, but also from the mouth, pharynx and larynx. Touch is absolutely the most multiform because its sense organ has a very large sensory surface. The skin, in fact, covers ours entirely with receptors differentiated by concentration and type of stimuli. Also some mucous membranes, such as those of the mouth, sexual organs, and anus, transmit tactile information. As far as hearing is concerned, the speech is complicated because its sensory organ, that is, the ear, also performs the function of perceiving movement, acceleration, and the force of gravity. Each sensory organ has specific receptors, called sensory receptors, which are activated, recorded, only specific stimuli. The receptor of sight does not respond to the stimuli of the receptor of hearing, and so that of hearing to those of taste, and so on. Moreover, the number of receptors is not the same for all organs. The eyes have the highest number of receptors, the nose the lowest. To which specific stimuli do these receptors respond? In the case of the eyes, the stimulus is made up of electromagnetic waves, distinguished by length and amplitude. Each stimulus activates the specific receptor that produces a neuronal signal that is transmitted via nerve fiber and is coded in the brain as color, intensity, or brightness. The nose, on the other hand, has receptors that respond to gas molecules and send signals then coded as odors. Tongue, mouth, and pharynx have receptors sensitive to liquid molecules, and their signal gives rise to the sensation of taste. For the skin, the stimuli are of deformation, tension, stress, injury, temperature, and the corresponding sensation is pain, contact, position, heat, and cold. The ear, because of its dual function, has receptors for mechanical vibrations that we perceive as sounds of various tones and volumes, and other receptors that instead provide input regarding movement, rotation, and balance. At the cerebral level, these inputs are afferent in different areas of the brain, although these are not isolated but interconnected. What happens if one of the sense organs doesn't work? Let's take the case of sight and its sensory organs, the eyes. What happens to that cerebral area? By way of example, below are the results of a particularly important research, Pietrini, Fury et al. 2004, which, thanks to diagnostic imaging, provides a clear picture of what has been asked above. Sagittal and axial images from group Z-score. Maps of activated areas are shown for the sighted and blind subjects. The inferior temporal IT and ventral temporal VT regions, activated by tactile and visual object perception, are indicated. The tactile visual overlap map shows the areas activated by both tactile and visual perception, shown in yellow, as well as the areas activated only by tactile, red, and visual, green, perception. The white lines in the sagittal images correspond to the locations of the axial slices, and similarly, the white line in the axial slice indicates the location of the sagittal section. Conversely, it can happen that a part of the cortex is damaged, while the sensorial organs are perfectly healthy. In this case, we speak of agnosia. It is a neuro-psychological disorder that affects the perceptual recognition of objects, people, sounds, or body parts, but limited to a single sensory mode and not attributable to a deficit of the corresponding sense organ, sight, hearing, sensitivity, etc. As a result of this connection, and with reference to the mental functions that organize and orient the sensory inputs, we can understand why, by eating an apple, we have an idea about its degree of ripeness, but we are not fully aware that this idea was formed from different perceptions about scent of smell, juiciness and sweetness of taste, intensity of the color of the peel, sight, consistency of the pulp, crack, hearing and touch. Perception in everyday life hardly ever involves a single organ of sense. Entering a cathedral, the scent of wood and incense is mixed with the echo of our steps and the colors of the paintings, while we feel the smooth surfaces of the marble and the warmth of votive candles. It is all these things together that tell us that we are in a church, an important ancient cathedral. We can therefore say that the perception is multimodal. This multimodality can become synesthesia. In this case, there is not only a combination of distinct sensory perceptions, but a real fusion. The poem Serenade by Clemens Brentano, 1778–1842, offers a clear example of synesthesia. Serenade. Hark, the flute laments again, and the cool springs murmur. Golden the sounds waft down. Be still, let us listen. Lovely supplication, gentle longing, how sweetly it speaks to the heart. Through the night that enfolds me shines the light of the music. Synesthesia is present in our daily lives even though we are not always aware of it. For example, it is present in some linguistic expressions or words where the fusion of different sensory planes is evident even though it is commonly used. Let's analyze, for example, the English word butterfly. We will think of a colored insect flying before our eyes. But etymologically, the word is made up of butter, a soft fat substance derived from milk, and fly, a verb that indicates moving in the air. If I say butter, I will think of a neutral taste, a stuffed canapé, a cake, something that melts in my hands and in my mouth. So, this sensation of evanescence, of delicacy, of touch and taste, passes through the verb fly to the side for which I will see an insect with very delicate wings, made of butter, which flies. Research by Levin, Chain, and Murphy in 1942 showed that visual perception, which is the subject of most literature studies, can be influenced by our needs and is therefore subjective rather than objective. Subjects were required to recognize images behind a grooved glass 1, 3, 6, 9 hours after lunch. The result was that as the hours of fasting increased, the subjects recognized those objects as food Hunger, as a primary need, influenced perception. The needs, in turn, are related to the social situation, so we can deduce that perception is also not only individual, but also social perception. A simple example can help. We think we are also among the hungry people who looked at the visual stimuli through opaque glass. A crescent shape at lunchtime will be interpreted by a Frenchman as omelette, by an Argentine as empanadas, by an Italian as piadina. An omelette, a piadina, an empanadas. They have in common the shape and satisfy the same need, hunger, but they are totally different recipes, for which even our gastronomic culture, the environment in which we live, influences our perception. In perception, therefore, there is no perfect correspondence between the stimulus, the external object, image, sound, perfume, etc., and the perception, how this stimulus is perceived by the brain. Moreover, individual differences make it almost impossible to assert that this is reality. In the field of art, which is the one in which we move in AW, the discourse is considerably complicated. I propose you a part of the analysis of the painting La Source by the painter Jean-Auguste Dominique Ingres, painted in 1856 and exhibited at the Louvre in Paris, written by the psychologist phenomenologist Rudolf Arnheim, who has dedicated many years of study to the theme of perception of art. So, the author writes in his book, "To make the right art, take such a detour around the head, and get away with it, required imagination and mastery. Moreover, the location, shape, and function of the jug evoke significant associations. The body of the jug can be seen as an inverted likeness of its neighbor, the head of the girl. Not only are they similar in shape, but both have one free unobstructed flank, which carries an ear handle, and one flank that is slightly overlapped. Both are tilted to the left, and there is a correspondence between the flowing water and the flowing air. This formal analogy serves to underscore the faultless geometry of the human shape, but by inviting comparison, it also stresses the differences. In contrast to the empty face of the jug, the features of the girl establish a more conspicuous contact with the observer. At the same time, the jug openly permits the flow of the water, whereas the girl's mouth is all but closed. Arnheim, 1974, page 154. It is now evident why this of perception is the first topic to be dealt with. It takes us straight to the heart of Anotherway. Perception of a work of art can be defined as subjective, but never objective, because perception itself as a mental process is not objective. In addition, countless variables such as our cultural background, our needs, our memories, and even the mother tongue we speak, or the author of the work spoken, are involved in the process of perception. But for this we will have time. In this lesson, the images are used for educational purposes only, and for the most part are original. Those for which it has been possible to identify the source are mentioned in the image itself. For the others, the author remains available to give credit to any rights holders who request it, using the following address: peraltravia@gmail.com.